a charming husband, a devoted wife, a girlfriend who vanished into thin air. Ralph Lampkin Jr.'s life seemed ordinary, unremarkable even. But beneath the surface lay a darkness that would shatter the lives of those closest to him. His story is one of violence, manipulation, and horrifying secrets that unraveled only after his own death. In 2017, Evelyn Lampkin was found brutally murdered in her Georgia home. Her life ended in a calculated act of violence. Ralph Lampkin Jr., her husband, quickly became the prime suspect. But before authorities could bring him to justice, he vanished, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and broken hearts. As law enforcement searched tirelessly for Ralph, another tragedy unfolded. In 2018, Monica McMillan, Ralph's girlfriend, disappeared without a trace. Her family pleaded for answers, their desperation growing with each passing day. The investigation led authorities to a remote Alabama road where skeletal remains were discovered. DNA tests confirmed the unthinkable. Monica had been murdered. Ralph Lampkin Jr.'s death in a car accident later that year seemed like the end of his story. But instead, it marked the beginning of a chilling investigation. As detectives delved deeper into his life, they uncovered a pattern of control, violence, and deception that left a trail of devastation. The secrets Ralph took to the grave unraveled piece by piece, revealing a man who had destroyed lives while hiding in plain sight. What drove him to such darkness? How many victims were there? And what lessons can we learn from the chilling story of a man who hid his true nature until it was too late? This is the story of Ralph Lampkin Jr., a man who lived a double life, leaving behind heartbreak and unanswered questions. It's a reminder that sometimes the most familiar faces hide the darkest secrets. Was Ralph Lampkin a man pushed to the edge, or was he something far more sinister? Welcome to CrimeByte, your portal into the darkest corners of human behavior. Here we bring you the stories that unsettle, intrigue, and reveal the truths hidden beneath layers of deception. In today's episode, we look into the chilling case of Ralph Lampkin Jr., a man who lived a double life of charm and terror, leaving behind a trail of murder, betrayal, and unanswered questions. As we unravel the secrets he took to his grave, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you never miss another gripping story from CrimeByte. Evelyn Lampkin was a beloved wife, mother, and friend. Her life seemed picture perfect. She was kind, compassionate, and loved by her neighbors. Yet, in a single moment, her world shattered. On a quiet summer evening in 2017, police were called to the Lampkin home in Georgia. Inside, they found a scene of unimaginable horror. Evelyn had been brutally murdered in her own home. The person responsible, all evidence pointed to her husband, Ralph Lampkin Jr. He had vanished just before police arrived, leaving behind a trail of shattered trust and unanswered questions. Neighbors described Ralph as a quiet man, reserved yet polite. But behind closed doors, cracks in the facade were evident. Evelyn's friends later revealed troubling details: arguments, tension, and a man increasingly consumed by jealousy and anger. These glimpses into their private life painted a picture of a marriage unraveling under the weight of control and distrust. Ralph Lampkin Jr. was no stranger to authority. With a history of manipulation and charm, he had always managed to deflect suspicion. But this time, his crime was too heinous to ignore. Investigators uncovered damning evidence: physical altercations leading up to the murder, Ralph's fingerprints at the scene, and a history of threats that Evelyn had confided in close friends. Ralph's motives remained unclear. Was it jealousy, rage, or something far darker? Whatever the reason, his disappearance complicated everything. Police issued a warrant for his arrest, but Ralph seemed to vanish without a trace, leaving behind a grieving family and a community desperate for answers. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, Evelyn's loved ones clung to hope. They believed Ralph would eventually be caught and face justice. But as the search grew colder, questions began to surface. How does a man commit such a brutal crime and simply disappear? And could Evelyn have been just the first of Ralph's victims? What kind of man kills his wife and vanishes into thin air? After Evelyn's murder, Ralph Lampkin Jr. became a ghost. Despite nationwide alerts and countless tips, he managed to evade capture. His escape was calculated. He knew how to stay one step ahead of the law. Law enforcement officials were baffled. Ralph left no digital footprint, no credit card transactions, no phone pings. It was as if he had disappeared into thin air. But the truth was more sinister. Ralph had a history of manipulation and deception, traits that allowed him to blend into any environment. He charmed strangers, exploited their kindness, and then moved on before suspicion could take root. As the months turned into years, the search for Ralph Lampkin Jr. became more than just a manhunt. It became a symbol of justice for Evelyn. Her family refused to give up, holding vigils and press conferences, begging the public for information. But each passing day without answers only deepened their grief. Ralph's ability to evade capture raised troubling questions. Did he have help? Was someone shielding him from the law? Or was he simply that cunning? Investigators began to piece together his movements, following a trail of whispers and half-truths. Witnesses claimed to have seen him in small towns, working odd jobs under fake names. Each tip brought hope, but none led to his capture. As time wore on, the urgency of the case began to wane. New crimes demanded attention, and resources were stretched thin. But for Evelyn's family, the wound remained fresh. Every unanswered question was a reminder of the justice they had yet to receive. Ralph Lampkin Jr. was more than just a fugitive. He was a reminder of the system's flaws, a man who slipped through the cracks and left a trail of devastation in his wake. But as the world moved on, one chilling question lingered. Could a man capable of such violence stop at just one life? Could a man capable of such violence stop at just one life? Monica McMillan was vibrant, kind, and full of life. Her friends and family describe her as someone who could brighten any room. But in late 2018, Monica's life took a dark turn, one that would forever link her name to the haunting legacy of Ralph Lampkin Jr. When Monica began her relationship with Ralph, she had no idea of his violent past. To her, he was a charming man, someone who seemed to offer stability in an uncertain world. But Ralph was anything but stable. Beneath his calm demeanor lay a man capable of unfathomable acts, and Monica's loved ones would soon discover just how dangerous he truly was. Monica's disappearance was sudden and unexplainable. One day she was there, texting friends, calling her family, making plans for the future. The next, she was gone. Calls went unanswered, texts were never returned. Her family's concern grew into panic as days turned into weeks with no word from Monica. Authorities were alerted, and an official missing persons case was opened. Investigators quickly learned about her relationship with Ralph Lampkin Jr., now a fugitive wanted for the murder of his wife. Suspicion immediately fell on Ralph, but without concrete evidence, police struggled to connect him to Monica's disappearance. What made Monica's case so chilling was its abruptness. There were no clear signs of struggle, no farewell messages, just a haunting void where her presence used to be. Her friends and family began to question everything. Had Ralph manipulated her into going into hiding? Or had he silenced her to keep his secrets buried? As the search for Monica continued, whispers of Ralph's violent tendencies resurfaced. People who had once known him described a man capable of hiding his true nature, of controlling those around him with an unsettling ease. His ability to mask his darkness made it nearly impossible to know what he was capable of, or how far he would go to cover his tracks. Monica McMillan's disappearance wasn't just another missing persons case. It was a puzzle piece in a much larger, more sinister picture. As the search continued, investigators began to suspect that her fate was tied directly to Ralph Lampkin Jr. But without evidence, they were left with more questions than answers. Was Monica's disappearance a coincidence, or was it another chapter in Ralph's deadly story? Fate has a way of catching up with even the most elusive of men. In late 2018, Ralph Lampkin Jr.'s life came to a sudden and violent end. A fatal car crash on a quiet Alabama road left the fugitive's body among the wreckage, bringing an unexpected halt to his years on the run. News of Ralph's death spread quickly, but it did little to bring closure to the lives he had destroyed. For Evelyn Lampkin's family, the man responsible for her murder was finally gone, but justice had been denied. For Monica McMillan's loved ones, Ralph's death raised more questions than it answered. Would they ever learn what happened to her? Investigators combed through the wreckage, hoping to find clues that might shed light on Ralph's final days. Among his belongings were cryptic notes, personal items, and evidence suggesting he had been living under an alias. But the most chilling discovery was a notebook filled with unsettling scribbles. fragments of thoughts that hinted at a disturbed mind. As law enforcement pieced together Ralph's movements leading up to the crash, a troubling pattern emerged. Witnesses reported seeing him with a woman fitting Monica's description just weeks before his death. These sightings suggested that Ralph and Monica were together, but what happened during that time remained a mystery. The crash was the final chapter in Ralph's life, but it wasn't the end of the story. His death reignited the search for answers, as investigators delved deeper into his past and the people he left behind. For Monica's family, hope and despair collided. They longed for closure but feared the worst. The community, once gripped by fear during Ralph's reign of terror, began to grapple with the implications of his death. Had Ralph taken his secrets to the grave? Or was there still a chance to uncover the truth about Monica's fate and the extent of his crimes? Could Ralph's death finally unlock the mysteries he left behind? It had been years since Monica McMillan disappeared, her absence an open wound for her family and a haunting mystery for law enforcement. But in 2023, a discovery in a remote wooded area brought long-awaited answers and devastating confirmation. The remains were confirmed to be Monica's through DNA testing, ending years of uncertainty for her loved ones. But the discovery came with a chilling revelation. Monica's death was no accident. Evidence found at the scene, fragments of clothing, disturbed soil, and the condition of her remains, indicated a violent end. Investigators pieced together the timeline, and the evidence left no doubt that Ralph Lampkin Jr. was responsible. Forensic analysis revealed marks on the bones, consistent with trauma inflicted by a sharp object. These findings painted a grim picture of Monica's final moments she likely spent fighting for her life against a man she once trusted. It was a heartbreaking truth for her family, who had clung to the hope that she might still be alive. The discovery of Monica's remains was a turning point in the case, offering both resolution and more questions. Why had Ralph targeted Monica? Was it a crime of passion, or was there a deeper, more sinister motive? And perhaps most chillingly, could there be other victims waiting to be found? The evidence against Ralph was overwhelming, but his death left a frustrating void. With no trial and no confession, the true extent of his crimes might never be fully uncovered. Monica's family, though grateful for closure, remained haunted by the brutality of her death and the years stolen from them by Ralph's heinous actions. What drove Ralph to such darkness? And could there be more victims still waiting for justice? Ralph Lampkin Jr. was a man of contradictions. To those who knew him, he seemed unremarkable, charming even. He attended community events, made friends easily, and appeared to live an ordinary life. But beneath this facade lay a man capable of unimaginable violence. Ralph's ability to mask his true nature allowed him to navigate life undetected. But as investigators dug deeper into his past, they uncovered disturbing patterns. Friends and acquaintances described a man who could be controlling and possessive, especially in his relationships. Small arguments often escalated into heated confrontations, leaving those around him uneasy. Forensic psychologists studying Ralph's case suggested that his outward charm was a tool, a way to manipulate and control those around him. His relationships often followed a similar trajectory, an initial period of affection and trust building, followed by jealousy, control, and ultimately violence. It was a pattern that spelled disaster for anyone who got too close. Despite the warning signs, Ralph's true nature went unnoticed for years. Friends and family dismissed his temper as stress or chalked up his controlling behavior to insecurity. But in hindsight, those closest to him began to see the red flags they had missed or ignored. Ralph's ability to lead a double life was both his strength and his downfall. While it allowed him to evade suspicion for years, it also created a trail of inconsistencies that investigators were eventually able to piece together. His charm and apparent normalcy made his crimes all the more shocking, leaving those who knew him questioning how they could have been so blind. What made Ralph snap, and could someone have stopped him before it was too late? For the families of Evelyn Lampkin and Monica McMillan, the wounds of their losses remain raw. The lives stolen by Ralph Lampkin Jr. left behind a trail of grief, unanswered questions, and a desperate need for justice. While the cases are now closed, the emotional scars left on their loved ones tell a story of pain, resilience, and the fight to preserve their memories. For Evelyn's family, her murder marked the beginning of a nightmare that that they could never have imagined. She had been a kind and devoted mother, a sister with an infectious laugh, and a friend who always went out of her way to help others. The brutality of her death at the hands of the man she once loved shattered the family's sense of safety and trust. Monica's disappearance and the subsequent discovery of her remains years later were no less devastating. Her family had spent years hoping for her safe return, only to be met with the cruel reality of her murder. The revelation that Ralph was responsible for both Evelyn's and Monica's deaths left them grappling with the senselessness of it all. Despite their heartbreak, both families have channeled their grief into action. They've become advocates for victims of domestic violence, sharing their stories to raise awareness and prevent similar tragedies. Memorial events held in Evelyn's and Monica's honor now serve as reminders of the importance of vigilance, community support, and the fight against violence. The families also continue to face the emotional toll of unanswered questions. What drove Ralph to commit these heinous acts? Were there warning signs they missed? And most hauntingly, could there have been other victims who have yet to be discovered? The pain of losing Evelyn and Monica is something their families will carry for the rest of their lives. Yet, through their advocacy and determination to keep their loved ones' memories alive, they have found a sense of purpose amid their grief. Can healing ever truly begin after such unimaginable loss? The tragic cases of Evelyn Lampkin and Monica McMillan serve as stark reminders of the dangers posed by unchecked domestic violence and the failure to recognize its early warning signs. Ralph Lampkin Jr.'s story is not just about one man's descent into darkness. It's about a society that often overlooks the cries for help from victims trapped in abusive relationships. Experts have pointed to several red flags in Ralph's behavior that were either ignored or rationalized. His controlling nature, sudden bursts of anger, and manipulative tactics were clear signs of a man capable of violence. Yet, like so many cases, these warnings were dismissed as personal quirks or temporary frustrations. The case also underscores the importance of providing resources and support to those at risk. Monica's friends recall her reluctance to share the full extent of Ralph's controlling behavior, likely out of fear or shame. Advocates emphasize that breaking the cycle of abuse requires creating safe spaces where victims can come forward without judgment. Law enforcement agencies have also learned valuable lessons from this case. The coordinated efforts to connect Ralph to both murders, using DNA evidence, witness testimonies, and detailed timelines, demonstrate the importance of persistence and innovation in solving complex crimes. Yet, the case also highlights the need for earlier intervention to prevent tragedies from occurring in the first place. Evelyn's and Monica's families continue to advocate for stronger protections for victims and harsher penalties for abusers. Their courage in sharing their stories has inspired others to speak out, creating a ripple effect that may save lives. The case of Ralph Lampkin Jr. forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about the prevalence of domestic violence and the societal changes needed to address it. How many lives could be saved if we acted sooner, listened more closely, and took every red flag seriously? How can society better protect victims before it's too late? In the wake of unimaginable loss, the community faced a choice: to retreat into silence or to rise together in solidarity. The stories of Evelyn and Monica sparked an outpouring of grief, anger, and determination. Neighbors, friends, and strangers united to ensure their lives were remembered and their deaths were not in vain. Community leaders organized meetings to address the systemic failures that allowed Ralph's violence to escalate unchecked. Law enforcement representatives, domestic violence advocates, and residents discussed practical ways to protect those at risk, from improving reporting mechanisms to increasing awareness of red flags. One of the most significant initiatives born from this tragedy was the establishment of the Evelyn and Monica Foundation, dedicated to supporting survivors of domestic violence. The foundation provides resources such as temporary housing, counseling, and legal assistance, helping victims escape dangerous situations before it's too late. Schools also took action, incorporating discussions about healthy relationships and warning signs of abuse into their curriculums. Young people learned to recognize controlling behavior, empowering them to seek help for themselves or their peers. As the community healed, a sense of purpose emerged. The tragedy became a rallying cry for change, sparking conversations that had long been avoided. Evelyn and Monica's names were no longer just reminders of loss, but symbols of resilience and the collective strength to fight back against violence. Despite the progress, questions lingered. Could the community have done more to protect Evelyn and Monica? How many others were silently suffering, their cries for help unheard? These questions fueled ongoing efforts to create a safer environment for everyone. Will their legacy bring hope to others facing similar battles? The case of Ralph Lampkin Jr. left an indelible mark on those who followed its twists and turns. It was a story of betrayal and violence, but also of resilience, justice, and the enduring power of truth. For Evelyn and Monica, justice came too late to save their lives, but their stories have saved others. The lessons learned from this case have reshaped the way law enforcement approaches domestic violence and missing persons investigations. Officers now receive specialized training to recognize patterns of coercive control and prioritize the safety of potential victims. The case also underscored the importance of community involvement, showing how collective vigilance can make a difference. Forensic science, too, played a pivotal role in this case, demonstrating its potential to uncover truths that might otherwise remain buried. The discovery of Monica's remains through DNA analysis was a breakthrough that highlighted the power of persistence and innovation. This case now serves as a teaching example for future forensic experts, ensuring that the tools of justice continue to evolve. Beyond the technical and procedural advancements, the case has left a deeper legacy, a call to action for society to confront the realities of domestic violence. Evelyn and Monica's stories remind us that behind every statistic is a person with dreams, relationships, and a future stolen by violence. As the Provo River continues to flow, it carries with it the memory of two women whose lives were cut short, but whose stories will not be forgotten. Their legacy lives on in the lives they've touched, the policies they've inspired, and the hearts of those who continue to fight for justice. The tragic stories of Evelyn Lampkin and Monica McMillan remind us that even the most serene settings can conceal unspeakable horrors. These two women, bound by love and trust for the same man, were betrayed in ways too devastating to comprehend. But their stories have become more than tales of loss. They are calls to action. For too long, violence like this has remained hidden in the shadows, taking victims silently and leaving families shattered. Ralph Lampkin Jr.'s crimes exposed the devastating consequences of unchecked rage and manipulation. But what if the warning signs had been caught earlier? What if someone had intervened before it was too late? The questions left behind are haunting. How many others are trapped in relationships that seem normal on the surface but hide terrifying truths beneath? And how many victims are still unheard, their cries for help drowned by fear or silence? Evelyn and Monica's legacy calls on all of us to be vigilant, to listen, and to act. Their stories teach us that no warning sign is too small, no concern too minor to be ignored. Every call made, every conversation started, could be the difference between life and death for someone trapped in the cycle of violence. As we reflect on their lives, we must also look inward. What can we do to create a world where women like Evelyn and Monica don't have to live in fear? What systems can we build to ensure that no one feels powerless against the forces of control and violence? Their stories demand that we confront these questions, not with despair, but with hope and action. At CrimeByte, we believe in the power of storytelling to spark change. By shedding light on the darkest corners of human behavior, we aim to inspire action and protect those who cannot protect themselves. But this mission is not ours alone. It belongs to all of us. We urge you to join this fight. If this story has moved you, share it. Start a conversation. Be the voice that speaks up when silence feels easier. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell to stay connected with us as we continue to uncover the stories that demand to be told. How many more lives can we save by telling these stories? How many voices can we amplify before it's too late?